All right, but he's taken all that and plenty of other news around today. Our always wonderful Sky News Queensland editor, Peta Gleeson. Gleeson, thank you for your time. I was reflecting today on the continuing fallout from Bandt's act of disunity with the flag. It's delivered precisely the opposite reaction, hasn't it? It's now become somewhat of a unifying front against him. I don't think we'll see an apology, though, anytime soon. But I think right across the political spectrum, Australians are not going to cop this.
What a kick in the guts for patriotic Australians. I mean, could you imagine a senator or a House of Congress MP in the United States doing something like this? And you think about the way in which he's dividing the country by these sorts of actions. And I think, Peter, what I could say today is that people who vote for the Greens, and look, I'm sure that they have admirable aims around saving the planet, but it's very important that you actually have a good look, pore over their policies, have a good look at what they want to do in this country. They're like the dog that chases the bus. He's never going to catch that bus, so they know they can be outlandish. They know that they can, sort of shock Australians by what they do, and they certainly do. We see it here in Brisbane with Brisbane Councillor John O'Shree. We see it with Lydia Thorpe. I would suggest that the good folk watching your show tonight grab their kids and say, listen, before you vote for the Greens next time, just have a look at what they intend to do to this country if, in fact, they ever have any influence.
Spot on. And I think a lot of young people don't take that time to look into the detail, particularly of the Greens. They used to be an environmental party 25 years ago, but they are a long, long way. I mean, I think they're a Marxist party now. I think they're a long way away from their original origins.
Radical.
Let's go to Victoria. Quite a debate today about the return of Josh Frydenberg. I note not many people had their name against some of the rumours in the paper, but certainly there's a talk that he's not going away. He's already plotting a way back into the parliament. I'm not saying this is coming from Josh. I think he's having a well-deserved break, but many others on the moderate side of politics are talking up his return. Funnily enough, no one can say, of course, what seat he will run in. Most, though, are writing off Kooyong. They say that's gone. Do you think that this has got legs?
I don't think so, Peter. I mean, I think, unfortunately for Australia, we've lost Josh Frydenberg to national politics. I think if he does return, he could do Australia a favour by running against Daniel Andrews. I think he'd certainly put it to Andrews at the next election. But Frydenberg will be much sought after among boards around the country. He will very quickly realise that he can earn a lot more money by being on boards throughout the country. And let's face it, if you look at politics now, Peter, and I remember the halcyon years, you think about the Hawke era, you think about the Howard era, the front benches were terrific. Look at Queensland. Look at Cabinet in Queensland. Seriously, you would not feed 3/4 of those Cabinet ministers. They wouldn't get a look in the private sector. And I fear now that the quality of our politicians is being devalued considerably, and the loss of Josh Frydenberg is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. Everything you say there is accurate, but in terms of the drive of Frydenberg, we went to law school at the same time. He went on to a banking career. He's had a number of high-level jobs inside the parliament before he was elected. For me, he could always have made money, right? He always had the opportunity for a stellar career, but he deeply believes in public service. So I think, yes, he's out for this term, but I think inside him is something that will drive him to want to come back in the parliament. The question is how he does it, and can he, more than I think a willingness. I think he's got that willingness, but we'll see. Right, let's go to this Royal Commission into Veterans Issues. Very interestingly, the former Minister for Veterans Affairs in the Morrison government gave evidence. This is the Royal Commission into Defence of Veteran Suicide. The former Minister, Andrew Gee, who's still in the Parliament, obviously in opposition, he told the Royal Commission he was forced to slash $430 million from the department's budget last year. At the same time, he was very concerned about this backlog of 50,000 compensation claims from soldiers. Now, he says, this is the former minister, that there is a clear link between the claims backlog and suicide rates inside the defence community. So why on earth, if there is that relationship, would you cut the funding needed to get these claims dealt with as quickly as possible?
really troubling, Peter. And Andrew G said that this particular portfolio should be in a cabinet, not out of cabinet. That's the first start that we should, get stuck into in particular on this issue. The mental health repercussions of veterans in this country is a national scandal. And you look at what happens in the United States and the way in which they look after their veterans compared to what happens here. And I know Scott Morrison resisted, tooth and nail a Royal Commission into exactly what was going on, although we are looking at one now which I think Andrew G is very much putting it front and centre of what's going on in that particular area. So I think that it's really troubling. It's an area that we've let these veterans down on, and let's hope that this Royal Commission can ultimately get to the bottom of it. And if those backlog of claims is as what Andrew G says, and he had to cut funding and they weren't got to, that is a national scandal.
I tell you, more than cabinet, I'd actually put the portfolio in under the Prime Minister. I would make Prime Ministers responsible for Veterans Affairs. I think what happens too often is it goes to a junior minister and they just can't cut through. And that junior minister, fine, can report through to the Prime Minister, but make this the job of the Prime Minister to start to turn things around. Otherwise, I tell you, I've seen it inside government, it falls off the batting order. Claire O'Neill, the new Home Affairs Minister, she's in Sri Lanka, as we know. They've announced that Australia will fund 4,000 odd GPS trackers to go to Sri Lankan authorities. They're going to put them on their shipping fleet for all their fishing vessels, and then they'll be able to track them in their waters and stop these vessels being bought and used by people smugglers. Now, all good and well, there's been 4 boats arrive in Australian waters since the election, but you can throw all the GPS you like at it. If they're going to abolish temporary protection visas, that is the biggest determinant about whether the boats will stay stopped or whether this little trickle is going to turn into a tsunami.
And once again, Peter, this is an issue that will define the Albanese government. It's certainly an issue that gets the attention of Australians. We saw that with the Tampa incident back in the John Howard days. The ones I really feel sorry for, and you wrote very eloquently about this recently, is those people who come to Australia legally. Those people who do the right thing, go through the process and are able to emigrate to Australia and then, as you said earlier, decree Australia as the greatest country on earth. For every illegal immigrant, for every illegal asylum seeker in this country, you are depriving the opportunity for someone to come here legally. That's the challenge for the Albanese government. I hold very little hope that they'll be able to stem the tide, but I guess this is a start.
We will see. Peter Gleeson, thank you as always.